Breathing in, I know I am breathing in. Breathing out, I know I am breathing out. It feels like this. Warmth or coolness, rough or smooth, long or short. Finding interest, having just enough effort to notice as clearly as possible each changing moment. We hold ourselves in kindness. May we be at ease with things just the way they are. May we hold others in this same heart space. Friends, relatives, maybe one of our first Buddhist teachers, an animal, a pet, is bringing into our heart space other beings that they may be at ease. Have happiness and the causes of happiness. May we cultivate this heart-centered practice of metta and karuna, loving kindness and compassion, to include others that we don't know. Someone might be neutral. Others we might have some difficulty with. All beings wish to be happy. And we do our best to wish them ease and well-being. Those that swim way below the surface in the darkness of the ocean, beings that walk, with only a few legs or maybe no legs, maybe lots and lots of legs. So many creatures. And those that fly, beings that are seen and unseen, known and unknown. May all beings everywhere be free from harm, safe and protected, and have ease and well-being. And may we acknowledge together with tenderness the many storms in our personal and collective lives and all the unnecessary suffering that keeps us spinning round and round. Fortunately, we can also be grateful for the bright wisdom and fearless compassion that arises in moments to skillfully respond to the many joys and sorrows of life. Let's aspire to be more fully embody the practical and liberating teachings and the practices from the Buddha and from our spiritual elders. Anicca vata sankara upadavaya domino upakitawa meruchanti te sam vapasamo sukho. All conditioned things are subject to impermanence. They arise and pass away. And seeing this clearly with mindfulness brings the greatest happiness, which is peace. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for your practice. And may we really realize that the merit of our practice is beneficial to all beings. And it can bring us joy, even if we have some difficult time in our sitting period. It still is bringing purity to our practice, and it gets shared with others. And before we take our break, many of you know that our little sangha here just kind of keeps growing. It's a small sangha, and some people arrive stressed, and some grieving, and some need a quiet place to breathe. And it's been beautiful, really, to witness how our community holds everyone. I like to think of it as the way that the Portland Northwest forest holds everything that falls into it, gently and without judgment. Although today we got some really serious rain. That wasn't so gentle, but it was fun. And so just to continue offering this refuge, we're hoping to take a couple more steps in the future of offering another sitting group in West Lynn and perhaps moving to a larger room. And we'd also like to offer fair support to our teachers who give so generously of their time and their hearts, including continuing bringing guest teachers and offering them our appreciation through the gift of our dana, generosity. And so if this group supports you or helps you steady your mind or soften your heart, I just want to invite you, if it feels right, to contribute to the Sangha building. And really, there isn't any amount that's too small. Even the cost of a cup of tea helps us grow in a way that's rooted in kindness. And so there's a donation box over there, and online I can give you the link for Venmo or Zelle. And if contributing financially isn't possible right now, just know that your presence here is a gift. And we can always use volunteers to help set up the room, to help take down equipment, to greet people, etc. So just, even if you're brand new, thank you for being a part of the community. And may our shared practice continue to ripple out in ways that sometimes we don't even see. So we'll take a few minutes. We'll come back in about 5 minutes. Thanks, Daryl. I tried to think of something that I thought I could actually put together in, a little less than an hour's time, and still covered something that, to me, is really meaningful in daily life. And that is the 5 spiritual faculties. Have any of you heard of the 5 spiritual faculties, or the 5 strengths, they're also called? They are all in various other places in the Buddhist teachings, but put together as the 5 spiritual faculties. It's a teaching that it's also called the 5 strengths, or in Pali, it's paññā indriyani. And this is a classic teaching, and it's one that I return to again and again, because it speaks directly to how practice actually functions in lived experience, and not as an abstract ideal, but as something dynamic and relational and very human. The Buddha described these 5 faculties with a very earthly image. He said that they're like a cart traveling along a road, and the cart has four wheels and a driver. And if any one of those wheels is too small or too weak or out of balance with the others, the ride becomes rough and unstable. And even if the destination is clear, the journey itself it can become difficult. And if the driver isn't paying attention, then it doesn't really matter how strong the wheels are, and eventually the cart just veers off course. And in this image, the four wheels, and you'll hear me mention these several times, um, faith or confidence, wisdom, energy, and concentration. And so I think I'll let you actually look at these so that when I talk about it and refer to it, you'll know what I'm talking about. So maybe Daniel or, Courtney, you can pass that out. Thank you. So this image appears in the early Buddhist discourses, including the Samyutta Nikaya, which you might hear me quote many times, and it's later elaborated in the Visuddhimagga, which is also where the metta practice is given. And so what's striking about how much the Buddha is emphasizing balance? He's not saying that one of these qualities is the most important, or that we should maximize a single factor and hope the rest will follow. But instead, he's pointing to something much more nuanced, the path that works when these qualities are developed together and kept in balance. Faith and wisdom must be strengthened together and held in relationship. So you'll see on my little drawing, faith and wisdom are opposite of each other. So they are held in relationship. And energy and concentration, they need to be balanced too. And to have one without the other creates problems. And you can see that on the illustration. Mindfulness is, interestingly, is different though. Mindfulness is there in the middle. The Buddha said that mindfulness can always be increased. There's no upper limit to how mindful we can be. And at first glance, this list may sound almost obvious. Of course, we need confidence and effort and mindfulness, concentration and wisdom. But the Buddha wasn't just naming useful qualities. He was pointing to how the mind organizes itself when it's oriented toward freedom. And this teaching invites us to look honestly at our own experience and to ask, which of these qualities are present for me right now? Which feels strong and reliable? Which feels weak or overworked or neglected? And how might imbalance be showing up in my practice or in my life? Already we can see that this isn't a theoretical teaching. It's diagnostic, and it gives us a way to assess what's happening in real time. So the five faculties are universal human capacities, and they're traditionally listed as faith or confidence or conviction, that's saddhā, energy or effort, which is viriya, mindfulness, which is sati, concentration is samādhi, and wisdom or discernment is paññā. The Buddha was remarkably pragmatic. He didn't begin his teaching career by speculating about the nature of reality or constructing metaphysical systems. In fact, he wouldn't talk about metaphysics when people asked. He began with the basic human condition that we suffer, and that suffering shows up in many forms: anxiety, stress, tension, grief, fear, dissatisfaction, restlessness, and a pervasive sense that something is never quite settled. How many of us feel that something is never quite settled? I can certainly say I do, especially in these times, which are rather unnerving. And at the same time, the Buddha made a bold and compassionate claim that suffering is workable, that we can engage with it in a way that leads to freedom. And to do that, we need to develop certain capacities of mind and heart. These 5 faculties are the capacities that he identified as essential. What's important to understand is that these faculties are not rare or mystical. They're present to some degree in almost everything we do. Anytime you learn a skill, playing a musical instrument, training for a sport, learning a language, developing a craft, these same qualities are involved. You need some confidence that learning is possible. Have any of you taken up anything new lately? You need energy to practice, and you need attention to what you're doing. You need the ability to focus, and you need discernment to notice what's working and what's not. The Buddha recognized these as universal human capacities and taught meditation as the craft in which we train them intentionally. And meditation isn't about becoming someone special, it's about learning how to use capacities we already have in a more skillful way. An important point is that these faculties are interdependent. They don't develop in isolation. Confidence supports effort. Effort supports mindfulness. Mindfulness stabilizes concentration. Concentration supports wisdom. And wisdom in turn feeds back into confidence, strengthening the whole system. So let's look at my little paper again. What does that look like? Let's see. I just want the people online to be able to see it. Let's see. Confidence, that's faith. Confidence supports effort. There's effort or energy. And then effort or energy supports mindfulness in the middle. And then mindfulness stabilizes concentration. And concentration supports wisdom. And wisdom in turn goes back into confidence, strengthening the whole system. This is why the Buddha described the path as self-correcting. When something is out of balance, awareness and discernment can notice it if the faculties are present. It's also why this teaching is so useful off the cushion. The same qualities that support meditation support how we speak, how we act, how we make decisions, how we respond to difficulty. The 5 strengths are not just meditation factors, they're life skills that are oriented toward awakening. So let's talk about faith or confidence or conviction, saddhā, the first of the 5 spiritual faculties. And it's more accurately it's always hard to translate these Pali words, but it's also translated as confidence or conviction. The word is saddhā in Pali. And faith or confidence comes first for a very simple reason. Without this conviction, we probably would never begin. We would never sit down to meditate, never experiment with awareness, never try to live differently than we already do. Faith is what gets us onto the path in the first place. But the Buddha was very careful about how he used this word, saddhā. It doesn't mean blind faith. It doesn't mean accepting something because an authority figure says it's true. It means a willingness to trust enough to try. It's the confidence that something is worth testing. And for many of us, our initial confidence is sort of borrowed. It might arise from meeting a teacher who embodies something that we want to understand. It might come from a book that names our suffering accurately and offers a way forward. or it might come from a moment. Oh, my arrow went way far forward. I have to scroll back to wherever I was. I don't know how that happened. I'm getting there. Okay, we're talking about blind faith. Wow, my arrow really sprung forward. Okay. Sometimes it comes from a moment, a very small moment, when we sense that there could be another way to relate to our lives. It can be a kind of bright faith. The early confidence is fragile, and it's often mixed with doubt. That's not a problem. In fact, that's how it's supposed to be. The Buddha never asked us to suppress doubt. He asked us to investigate. And as practice continues, sometimes something important begins to happen. Confidence starts to move from being externally inspired to being internally verified. And this is called verified faith. We notice for ourselves that mindfulness actually makes a difference. We see that staying with the breath can calm agitation. We experience that bringing awareness to the body creates stability. We discover that noticing clinging can soften it. Each time this happens, confidence deepens, not as a belief, but as an experience. Because the word faith carries so much cultural and emotional baggage, it can be helpful to think of saddhā as conviction. Conviction shapes how we see the world and how we see ourselves. What do we believe is possible? What is realistic? What do we believe we are capable of cultivating? In the Buddhist teaching, the happiness we're aiming for goes beyond anything we've known before. It goes beyond pleasure, it goes beyond success, beyond even psychological well-being. In the Buddhist teaching, the happiness we're aiming for goes beyond anything we've known before. And because it's beyond our ordinary experience, we can't know in advance whether it's possible. But it is said to be unwavering. So at first, the views that support practice function as convictions rather than as confirmed knowledge. And only after practice bears fruit do those convictions turn into knowing. And so the tradition describes a progress of faith that helps clarify this process. There's said to be these 4 kinds of faith, which I covered, but I'm going to mention again. Blind faith, bright faith, verified faith, and unwavering faith. Blind faith and bright faith can look similar on the surface. Both can feel energizing. Both can come with a sense of excitement and possibility. But blind faith is closed. It discourages questioning, and it says, just believe. Bright faith, on the other hand, is open and alive. It's that first attraction to the path, being inspired by a teacher or a teaching or a new sense of possibility when we'd previously felt trapped or unworthy. As Sharon Salzberg has described it, bright faith can feel intoxicating. It can turn our lives around, and it's often necessary. It's what gives us the energy to begin. But bright faith is not the end of the road. The Buddhist teaching, it's just the beginning. Through questioning, through putting the teachings into practice, through setting them in the laboratory, testing them in our own lives, bright faith matures into the next one, which is verified faith. Verified faith relies less on external authority and more on our own experience. We don't believe mindfulness helps, we know it helps because we've seen it again and again. And over time, as practice deepens and repeats itself, verified faith becomes the next one, unwavering faith. This kind of faith doesn't need constant reassurance. It's like something that has seeped into the bones. We know it in the same way that we know that kindness matters or that love transforms. We don't need to argue for it. We've lived it. What's important here is that the Buddha never praised blind faith. In fact, blind faith is dangerous precisely because it cannot mature. It stops inquiry. It stops growth. Bright faith, by contrast, is meant to be questioned, tested, and refined. Another crucial aspect of saddhā is that it applies not only to the world, but to ourselves. Conviction includes a sense that we are capable of practicing, that we can learn, that we can change, that we can take responsibility for the mind. And this matters because the path requires effort, patience, and resilience. If we don't believe that our actions make a difference, it's very hard to sustain practice. Faith supports effort by giving us a reason to try. And at the same time, faith has to be balanced with wisdom. Too much faith without wisdom can become gullibility or spiritual bypassing. We can idealize teachers, we can romanticize practice, or ignore what isn't working. With wisdom asks questions, and wisdom checks results. This is why the Buddha paired faith and wisdom together as a balancing pair. Faith opens the door, and wisdom keeps us honest. So when we look at our own practice, what kind of faith is present for me right now? Is it borrowed? Is it bright? Is it verified or wavering? Where might wisdom need to be brought into balance faith? And where might a lack of confidence be quietly undermining effort? Faith in the Buddhist sense is not about certainty. It's about trusting the process enough to stay engaged. It's about trusting that awareness, cultivated carefully and wisely, really can lead to freedom. And that trust, tested, refined, and balanced, is what allows the rest of the faculties to grow. And so, building on confidence and conviction, then we come to the second faculty, effort, sometimes referred to also as energy or effort. In Pali, it's viriya. The Buddha was very clear about this. There's no practice without effort. No matter how inspired we feel, no matter how much we believe in the path, nothing can actually happen unless we apply ourselves. Effort is what turns possibility into lived experience. It takes effort just to begin. It takes effort to sit down and meditate. We put effort into coming here, sitting down, and meditating. It takes effort to turn toward experience rather than away from it. And it takes effort to notice when the mind has wandered and to gently bring it back again and again and again. And yet the Buddha was equally clear that effort must be wise. Not all effort is helpful. Effort that is strained, harsh, or driven by self-judgment tends to create more suffering rather than less. On the other hand, effort that is too lax or complacent allows old habits to run the show. I'm sure we're all too familiar with old habits running our show. So viriya is not about forcing the mind into submission. It's about a willingness to engage, a steady, patient application of energy in the direction of what is skillful. Now, the Buddha described effort in terms of the four basic movements. You've probably heard this before in studying the Eightfold Path, which also includes right effort. And it takes a while to learn and understand these, but it makes a lot of sense, really. There's effort to prevent unskillful states from arising. There's effort to abandon already arisen. And then there's effort to cultivate skillful states that have not yet arisen. And there's effort to maintain and deepen skillful states that are already present and have already arisen. So we have unskillful states preventing from arising, unskillful states abandoning them when they've already arisen, noticing skillful effort if states have not yet arisen, and effort to maintain these states that are already present, maintaining loving kindness, maintaining compassion, maintaining sympathetic joy after they've already arisen. So notice that none of this requires aggression toward ourselves. It requires clarity and care. It asks us to notice what actually leads toward peace and what leads away from it. In meditation, effort can look really simple. It's the energy to stay with the breath for one more moment. It's the effort to feel the body rather than disappearing into thought. It's the effort to begin again without scolding ourselves. And sometimes effort feels difficult. There are days when just staying present feels like hard work. Old patterns assert themselves. The mind resists. And at those times, viriya can feel almost heroic. There's a courage involved in not turning away. And at other times, effort feels light and even joyful. You may feel as though you're being carried along the practice rather than pushing it forward. The Buddha used the image of a raft floating down a gentle stream. You don't have to paddle hard, but you still have to steer. You still have to avoid getting stuck in the eddies or tangled in the branches. And this image is important because it reminds us that effort changes over time. What was once difficult can become natural. What once required discipline can later feel like care. I feel this kind of effort that I need to put forth in exercising to strengthen my legs and my hips as I've gotten older. And it takes effort. You know, who wants to do this stuff over and over again? And then your body hurts. But slowly, with this physical therapy, and it's becoming easier and I can feel the results. And so what is sometimes difficult can later become natural. Another important aspect of viriya is that it's supported by confidence. So when we trust that practice is meaningful, effort feels worthwhile. When confidence is weak, effort collapses. We stop showing up, not because we're lazy, but because we don't quite believe that it matters. This is one reason the Buddha placed faith first. Faith gives energy somewhere to go. And at the same time, effort or energy must be balanced with concentration. Too much effort without sufficient steadiness leads to restlessness, agitation, and burnout. Many of us know what it's like to try too hard to push the mind, to strive for results, to turn crack. When effort is unbalanced, meditation can become tense. The body tightens, the breath shortens, the mind becomes brittle. This is why the Buddha paired energy and concentration as a balancing set. Energy, effort brings engagement, and concentration brings settling. And when these two are in balance, effort becomes sustainable. It's also important to recognize that effort includes the effort to rest when needed. Knowing when to ease up is part of wisdom. There are times when the most skillful effort is to soften, to allow, to trust that awareness itself is doing the work. In daily life, viriya shows up in how we speak, how we act, how we make choices. It's the energy to pause before reacting. It's the effort to speak truthfully and kindly. It's the willingness to take responsibility for our intentions rather than blaming circumstances. The Buddha emphasized that right effort is not about achieving a particular state. It's about inclining the mind again and again toward what leads to less suffering and more freedom. So when we reflect on our own practice, it can be helpful to ask, what does effort feel like for me right now? Is it strained, collapsed, or balanced? Where might I be pushing too hard? Where might I be giving up too easily? Effort, when guided by mindfulness and supported by confidence, becomes something steady and kind. It's distant, it's patient, and it's what keeps us walking the path step by step, even when the road is uneven. There's an entire chapter in one of the teachings of the Buddhist, the Samyutta Nikaya, and it's number 48, and it's devoted to the five faculties. Again and again, the Buddha emphasizes not just developing these qualities, but balancing them. So, to sort of paraphrase it, things are always repeated because it was taught by repetition, verbal repetition. So, when the faculty of confidence is developed and cultivated, it leads to the realization of the fruit of the path. When the faculty of energy is developed and cultivated, it leads to the realization of the fruit of the path. When the faculty of mindfulness is cultivated, it leads to the fruit of the path. When the faculty of concentration is developed, it leads to the realization of the fruit of the path. When the faculty of wisdom is developed, it leads to the realization of the fruit of the path. So, in other words, the Buddha says that when each of these faculties is developed and cultivated, it leads toward awakening. None of them are optional. None of them stand alone. So now we come to the faculty that many of us associate the most strongly with Buddhist practice, and that's mindfulness, or in Pali, sati. But the Buddha's understanding of mindfulness is actually broader and more relational than how the word is often used today. Sati literally means to remember, not remembering facts or stories, but remembering to stay present, to remember what we're doing, what we are feeling, what state of mind we are in. Mindfulness is what keeps us connected to experience as it unfolds rather than lost in habit or reaction. So without mindfulness, confidence really doesn't know where to land, and effort doesn't know where to go. So mindfulness is what allows effort to become skillful rather than compulsive. The Buddha described mindfulness as awareness, and if you've ever tried to study the four foundations of mindfulness, you will recall that it's awareness of the body, of feeling tone, of mind states, and patterns of experience. But in daily life, mindfulness can be very simple. It's the moment that you notice, oh, I'm tense, or I'm rushing, or this feels pleasant, and I'm clinging to it. That moment of noticing is not trivial. It's the moment when choice becomes possible. Mindfulness is also what allows us to pause. Without it, we move automatically from feeling to reaction, from thought to speech, from impulse to action. With mindfulness, there's just enough space to ask, is this helpful? Is this kind? Is this necessary? It's important to say that mindfulness is not meant to be cold or detached. When sati is balanced, it's warm, interested, and humane. It includes awareness of emotion, vulnerability, and care. When mindfulness is weak, we feel scattered, reactive, or lost. When it's too strong, without wisdom or kindness, it can be critical or self-monitoring. And this is why mindfulness must be supported by the other faculties, especially concentration and wisdom. Mindfulness doesn't try to fix the experience. It tries to know experience, direct knowing. And in knowing, something begins to soften on its own. The fourth faculty is concentration, or samādhi, steadiness and unification. Samādhi. This faculty is often misunderstood. Sometimes it's idealized, and sometimes it's avoided altogether. Samādhi refers to the gathering and unifying of the mind. It's the capacity to stay with experience long enough for it to settle, deepen, and reveal itself more clearly. Without concentration, mindfulness flickers. With concentration, awareness can become continuous. Concentration doesn't mean forcing the mind to stay on one thing. It means allowing attention to stabilize naturally. When concentration fragmented, there's less pulling in every direction. In meditation, samadhi might feel like the breath becoming more steady, the body more at ease, the mind less jumpy. And in daily life, it might show up as being able to stay present in a conversation or remain grounded in a difficult moment without shutting down. Concentration supports insight because it gives us enough stillness to see clearly. Without steadiness, wisdom stays a concept. With steadiness, understanding sinks in. But the Buddha was very clear that concentration must be balanced with energy and effort. Too much concentration without energy leads to dullness, heaviness, or without concentration leads to restlessness and agitation. When energy and concentration are balanced, practice feels alive, but not tense, calm, but not sleepy. It's also worth saying that concentration is not something that we achieve. It's something that grows when conditions are right. When effort is gentle, mindfulness is present, and we're not at war with ourselves. In this way, concentration becomes a place of refuge, not an escape from life, but a place of steadiness that we can return to again and again. The fifth faculty is wisdom, paññā. We arrive at this fifth faculty, and I want to say right away that paññā is not the kind of wisdom that comes from accumulating knowledge. It's not about being smart or well-read or having an impressive spiritual vocabulary. Paññā is something much more intimate and lived. It's the wisdom that comes from seeing clearly, from direct experience, again and again over time. In the Buddhist teachings, paññā is often described as seeing things as they actually are. This would be seeing impermanence, anicca, unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, and not self, anatta. But I want to emphasize that seeing is not abstract. It doesn't live in the head. It lives in the body, in the heart, in how we relate to our own experience and to one another. Paññā is what helps us know in a very embodied way, oh, this is what's happening now. Not what should be happening, not what used to happen, not what I wish were happening, but this is right here. One of the ways that paññā develops is through discernment. Discernment is a gentle but firm capacity to distinguish between what leads to suffering and what leads to freedom. The Buddha used very simple language around this. He would say, this leads to harm. This leads to welfare. This leads to suffering. This leads to the end of suffering. Paññā, or wisdom, knows the difference, not as a rule book, but through lived understanding. And it's important to remember that wisdom does not stand alone. In the teaching of the five faculties, samādhi, and wisdom, paññā, wisdom is always in relationship with the others, especially with mindfulness and concentration. Without mindfulness, wisdom doesn't have anything to stand on. And without concentration, wisdom can't settle deeply enough to see clearly. And without wisdom, mindfulness can become mechanical. And concentration can become another way of controlling experience. I'd like to cite briefly another, the sutta in Samyutta Nikaya 48. It's the Indriya Sutta. And here the Buddha explicitly speaks about knowing the strength and weakness of each faculty. In the Samyutta Nikaya 48, the Buddha says, a practitioner should know when a faculty is too weak, when it's too strong, and how to bring it into balance. The work is not maximizing, but tuning. So paññā is not the final prize we get at the end of practice. It's something that gradually matures as these faculties support one another. And I also want to say something important here, that wisdom is compassionate. If what we call wisdom is harsh, shaming, or rigid, it's probably missing something. True paññā softens the heart. It helps us understand why others act the way they do. There's a tenderness that comes from seeing how conditioned we all are, seeing how habits, fears, histories, and unmet needs shape our behavior. Wisdom doesn't excuse harmful actions, but it does help us respond with clarity rather than reactivity. Another quality of paññā is humility. The more we see, the more we realize how much we don't know. And wisdom doesn't make us certain, it makes us curious. It allows us to stay open, to keep learning, to be corrected, to change our minds. And wisdom also knows when not to push, when effort turns into striving, when the investigation turns into rumination, when spiritual practice becomes another identity to defend. Paññā can sense when it's time to act and when it's time to rest. So I'd like to pause here just to offer a short guided reflection so that we can feel into this faculty rather than just think about it. So if you'd like to take a moment and feel comfortable, just to allow your eyes to close and soften your gaze. And bring your attention to the body sitting here. Feel the contact points. Feet on the floor, body on the chair or cushion. Gently bring to mind a situation in your life that feels a little confusing right now. Not the most overwhelming thing, just simply mildly unresolved. As you hold this situation in awareness, see if you can ask very quietly inside, what is actually happening here? Not what should I do, not who's right or wrong, just what is happening. Notice any sensations in the body as you stay with that question. Tightness, warmth, movement, ease, discomfort. And then see if you can ask one more question. What do I know for sure in this moment? Let the answer be simple. Maybe it's, this is uncomfortable, or I don't have to decide anything right now, or this feeling changes. Rest for a few breaths with whatever clarity is available. No need to force more. And when you're ready, gently return your attention to the room. This just touches on wisdom a little bit. Wisdom often shows up just like that, quietly, simply, without fanfare. It's not dramatic. It doesn't shout, it whispers. And it's usually very practical. In daily life, paññā might sound like, this conversation isn't going anywhere right now. Or I need to rest. Or I'm reacting from fear. Or this pattern keeps repeating. Or I can let this go. None of that is mystical, but it's deeply liberating. The Buddha described wisdom as something that cuts through ignorance. And ignorance in this context doesn't mean being stupid or naive. It means not seeing clearly. It means being caught in habits of misperception, thinking what is impermanent is permanent, and what is unreliable is reliable. What is not self is self. This wisdom doesn't eliminate difficulty from our lives, but it changes our relationship to difficulty. It helps us stop adding unnecessary suffering on top of what's already here. And maybe most importantly, wisdom grows slowly. It grows through repetition, through making mistakes and noticing them, through beginning again, through living our lives with as much honesty and care as we can muster. So if you ever think, I should be wiser by now, that thought itself can be held with wisdom. Paññā doesn't rush. It trusts the process. It knows that understanding unfolds in its own time. The faculty of wisdom invites us to stay close to experience, to keep learning from our lives, and to meet each moment, pleasant or unpleasant or neutral, with a little more clarity and kindness than before. And that, in the end, is what these five faculties are really supporting. Not becoming someone else, but becoming more fully present for the life that we're already living. Here I'd like to refer to another Samyutta Nikaya again. It's verse 45.2. It's the Upadha Sutta on spiritual friendship. And this is a quote from Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. Admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie is actually the whole of the holy life. Connected explicitly to the faculties, in my words, if spiritual friendship is the whole of the holy life, then it's also what supports the growth of all five faculties: our confidence, our effort, our mindfulness, our steadiness, and our wisdom. We don't develop these faculties in isolation. We borrow confidence from one another, and we steady one another's effort. We remind each other to be mindful. So as I come to the end of this exploration of the five faculties, it might be helpful to remember that these are not five separate practices that we have to juggle or perfect. They're five qualities of heart and mind that can grow together, supporting one another, shaping how we meet our lives. So to review, what's the first one? Confidence. Faith reminds us why we practice it all. And it's quiet trust that waking up is possible, that this path is worth walking, even when it's not easy. Confidence gives us direction. The second one, anybody remember? Energy, effort, viriya. It's what allows us to keep showing up. It's the willingness to engage rather than turn away, to begin again, to make the effort that feels possible today, not the effort we imagine we should be making. Okay, the third one, the center of the four wheels, mindfulness. Sati brings us into contact with what's actually happening. It helps us notice when we're caught, when we're reactive, when we're at ease. Mindfulness gives us choice. Concentration, samādhi, steadies us. It gathers the mind so that we're not constantly pulled apart by distraction or overwhelm. With steadiness, we can stay present long enough for understanding to deepen. And wisdom, paññā, grows out of all of this. Wisdom sees what leads to suffering and what leads to freedom, what is skillful, what is unskillful. It's practical, compassionate, and deeply human. One simple way to work with the five faculties in daily life is to ask gently, which of these is needed right now? More confidence, more ease, more clarity, more steadiness. We don't need all five at full strength all the time. The practice is learning to sense what's missing and to respond with care. And in this way, the five faculties become not just teachings we study, but companions that we walk with, quietly shaping how we speak, how we listen, how we meet the unfolding of our lives. So as I slowly come to the end of this talk, let's pause for a moment to acknowledge the goodness of this practice. We've gathered with intention, we've listened, reflected, and practiced as best we could. That in itself is something worthy of appreciation. And in the Buddhist tradition, we often take a moment to dedicate the merit of our practice. Merit here doesn't mean earning points or being good. It's simply recognizing that wholesome action have effects and that we don't practice only for ourselves. So silently or aloud, if you wish, you might reflect, may any understanding, steadiness, or kindness that have risen through this practice be shared outwardly. May it support our own freedom from suffering. May it benefit those we love, those we struggle with, and those we don't know yet. May it contribute in whatever small way to greater clarity and compassion in the world. And as we carry on with our lives, may the five faculties, confidence, effort, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom, continue to grow not as ideals to live up to, but as living qualities that we can keep discovering moment by moment. Thank you for listening to the Dharma. And maybe you've been referring to those handouts, some that I gave, but if you haven't, I think you all did, but look at the questions for reflections. And I'm going to take a moment to put them in the chat and give us a chance to have a little bit of discussion. There it comes in the chat, I think. So just let those words settle down for a few minutes and maybe look at some of those questions. And while you're doing that, I want to give a reminder because I didn't really make any announcements, but there's going to be a day-long retreat here, July 11th, and that's going to be Trina leading it, and we have the room upstairs, I believe. There'll be a sign on the door if it isn't, but it's basically from 10 to 3:30, and then you bring your lunch, and then there's a break, and then we're continuing with the 4:30 to 6:30. So if you want to try a full day of practice in person, it's always nice, and it's also available on Zoom. So I'm going to put in the chat, if it'll go there, my little graphic drawing. There it is. So if you want to download it later while we're still in the meeting. You can if you want to look at it. There it is. So, do any of those questions look interesting or pop out for you to feel like you want to talk about? We can pass the microphone around so that the people on Zoom can hear us. And I'm going to take a moment here and stop the recording. Okay, bye-bye recording.